Welcome back to the Milwaukee Show, and today we are talking about the Los Angeles Kings and how Quinton Byfield is not going to go bye-bye. That's right, so Quinton Byfield has signed a 5-year contract for $6.25 million for, well, average annual value for $31.5 million at the end of all this, and this is a pretty sweet deal all around. I gotta say, this is an amazing steal for an organization I usually cannot stand for anything that they usually do, because this team just... I'll talk all about it, because that's the whole point of this video. But for right now, the big star of this team, the gold star I'm giving them, is this signing. So he's only 21 years old, 20 goals, 55 points this year. Now, if you really applied that to any player in the NHL, you would probably just be like, well, that's an okay year. But 21 years old, this guy's slowly blossoming into that two-way amazing centerman that he's not really been quite on the center. He's kind of been on the wing, and he's kind of been jumbled around because it is kind of tough because you don't want him on the third line, but that's the best spot for him to be a centerman because you've got Danault and Anze Kopitar, so he's got to be on the wing if he wants to play top minutes, which is working out because he's playing good. But it's just kind of another issue with this whole team about the Los Angeles Kings that I can't stand because they're really bad formatted, but that's what I'm going to talk all about. But first, the signing. So this guy, he's young. He's going to finish this deal at 26. He gets a solid extension where he really gets to prove himself. And if he plays anywhere near as good as, or better than what he's going to now, especially with the way the salary cap is going up and up and up and up, that by the time he's done, as long as he's a good two-way guy and is a consistent, I assume he should be a solid, consistent, at least 70, 80 point guy. I don't really see him ever being that 100 point big goal scorer, but I do see him as the Anze Kopitar, where he's in the 80s of points in his really good years, and he's a huge two-way guy, can lay the body, is that type of good, solid centerman on your team that every single team that wants to win needs. But here's the issue with this contract to me, is that when it's over and done with, he'll be 26, right? He'll still be in his prime. He's plenty of time to develop, get to that point. He's going to really cash in then, as long as nothing horrible happens. But he's still got to grow, so I think $6.25 million, I think right now is a little bit of an overpay. But, the first 2 years, I think, will be an amazing steal. The next few years after that will be an absolute steal once he gets into that true, NHL years. But I gotta say, and it's really good because it keeps the team competitive, right? Every single team that wants to win the Stanley Cup needs to have those deals where their guys aren't being paid the big money bucks yet, right? Where you have the defenseman who's really good still being paid $4 million by the time he gets to his big number. He's got that big extension, And that's what they're getting with this deal. They're going to have plenty of cap space going forward to give him some better guys around him. But the big issue with this team is the rest of the freaking team. Because look at what else he has to play with. You've got Anze Kopitar, where offensively, this team with Kopitar and Danault, with their age, and especially since they've never been those big point guys, right? Those two are definitely the two-way centermen meant to anchor a line. But those guys are getting way up there in age, and especially in the next few years are going to be going by. Now, of course, when those guys go away, then that cap space will open up. But especially for the first couple of years, where he's going to really be growing into those shoes, I guess, they're not going to be that competitive. And then other than that, especially with guys like Moore and Fiala, if they have Fiala is a guy that could definitely explode, I think, but with the way the Kings are structured, I don't think he's going to be allowed to do that. But with guys like Trevor Moore scoring, I think, 36 goals, was it this year? 31? 30, I don't know. Whatever it was, he led the team in goals, and with him, it's just if they have a bad year, right? If one of those guys have a bad year, or both of them, or a guy like Kempe, right? If all these guys have bad years or just have okay years, it's going to be once again where it's they're not great offensively, they're not going to pound the net, they have fine depth, but you have fine depth, but they don't have the upfront scoring to really make it significant. And so it's just a whole team of second liners, it kind of feels to me at this point. Not a whole team, but it's 2 second lines and then 2 third or fourth lines. And to me, it's just kind of The offense just isn't amazing. They're not going to be scoring a ton of goals out there, and the whole point of this team is that they're very structured. They're a unit together. But when it comes to the defense, it's fine, but it's not great, especially when you have guys like Brandt Clark that they're going to really probably give a platform to try to be that offense defenseman. Even so, he's not going to be that amazing defensive guy. He's not going to be like a Brock Faber where he actually could be held like liable in his own end. So we're going to be looking to Clark for offense, which isn't going to be really astounding because they're not great offensively anyways. But then you have like guys like Doughty and Gavrikov. Like, it's like, sure, you and Edmondson they sign, you have good defense, but it's the type of defense where it's like, yeah, it's fine if the offense was amazing, and it's not. And the offense is fine if the defense amazing, which it's okay. So they're both pretty much like middling, like maybe like what? Top, like the offense is probably like maybe like 20th best in the NHL, probably higher than that, but you get what I mean. Like, it's definitely from like the 15 to 20 range, and then the defense probably like maybe definitely like in that like top like 10 to 15 range, not top 10, but it's like it's in the teens. And when you're in the teens and with a team of 32 teams, that means you're mid in the NHL. And then when it comes to goaltending, they bring in Darcy Kemper after moving on from Cam Talbot. Talbot was a fine goaltender. He was the all-star for the Kings. And Kemper is a previous all-star, and unless he turns back the time to the Coyotes days, it's another like pretty mid goaltender where it's like, yeah, he's good, and he's good enough to play on a team that can play in front of him, but he was even replaced by his backup last year in Lindgren for the Capitals. So it's like all this team amounts to is a mid team. And it's like, sure, you could say, well, that's fine for this year, right? This year they're still growing, they still have like they still Byfield's only 21 years old. He's got plenty of time ahead of him. But with him and the other like young guys on this team, like none of the other young guys are really going to be those huge top 6 game changers as well. They're kind of like in those same roles as a guy like Kempe is the amount that I could see them adding up to. So what they have overall is just a team full of like mid players, and the future that's going to come with that is more mid players. They don't have any amazing prospects like coming up. Quinton Byfield's like their main one, and so is Brandt Clark. So those are like their main prospects, but those guys aren't going to be able to like do all the heavy lifting right now. Sure, maybe Byfield could like become the number one like offensive producer potentially this year, but I don't see that happening until like maybe in 2 years from now. This year feels like another year where they have like 55 points, maybe gets to 60, somewhere in that like nice solid range, but the next year where he could really jump into that big like 30 goal scoring year and really start owning it. He'll only be 22, 23 by then, so he's got plenty of time. And he can't have all the pressure on him, right? He is not the main point of this team, and that is kind of my biggest issue with this team is Kopitar is not the guy anymore, right? He just isn't. He's not going to be able to drag this team along, and he's going slowly down. And what this team is amounting to is the issue of now and the future. And because right now, the team is not strong in any category. They're all very mid. And they made the playoffs this year by 1 point. They had 99 points to be third in the Pacific. The teams that finished in the wild card had 99 and 98 points. So they literally made it in by 1 point. If they lost one of the games that they played, they would have 97 points, and they would have missed the playoffs. That's how much it came down to, was one win. And let's take a look at the teams that they beat this year, right? The San Jose Sharks, and these are just 3 matchups I decided to put on the board. I guess 4. The San Jose Sharks, they won 3 out of 4 matchups against them. The Sharks are a little bit better with a little bit more offense and a little bit more energy in them this season. 3 out of 4 times, do you think the Kings could really redo that again when they have like some exciting players like Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith and Eklund really trying to show up now? And the little bit of the better improvements that they added to the team, just that much better. If they steal one of those games, just one from this season, the Kings don't make the playoffs. Just one. If they were 2 for 4. I definitely think the tiny improvements that the Sharks made this year, they can maybe steal one of those wins. Then you've got a team like New Jersey. The Kings won both of the games this year. Do you really think that this team that is very mid is going to be able to score more goals than a team that's got some better offense, better defense, and especially the better goaltending of the New Jersey Devils? Do you think they can win 2 out of 2 matchups again? I don't think so. What about a team like Vancouver? 3 for 4 actually this year for the LA Kings against Vancouver. I think Vancouver definitely could swindle a couple of those ones. And then you have a team like Seattle as well, who definitely feels like their young guys are going to be able to jump up and start making some bigger impacts. They were 2 for 3 against Seattle this year. Just one more win, and they're out of the playoffs. The Kings, I don't know if they are better or worse than they are going into next year, right? With a couple of their signings, they really only lose Victor Arvidsson and Talbot. The replacements for Arvidsson doesn't exist. For Talbot, I guess Kemper could potentially be a fine goaltender, but they also got Copley, and they could, who knows? I don't think goaltending is going to be end-all be-all there. To me, this team is either the same or worse than they are from last year. And to me, it is going to be a year where they miss the playoffs. I think the Vegas Golden Knights are better than they were. I think Vancouver is going to stay a playoff team. And you've got Edmonton, who is absolutely still a playoff team. So you have the Pacific basically booked up. And potentially, every single year you have a team like Vancouver that does have, their random crazy year. So who's to say that the Anaheim Ducks aren't a random crazy team that just for some reason has an amazing season and makes it into the playoffs, right? Every year you have one of those teams, especially in each division. And to me, the Kings are primed to be that team that gets bounced out of the playoffs from what made it in the West this year. And to me, it's a problem now, and it's going to be a problem in the future. And of course, the future can hold anything, right? They could do so many things. But the issue is right now that Byfield is... Even though he is that main centerman that every team wants and needs to build around for the Kings, he still isn't going to be that big point producer, right? I don't think he's ever been primed for that. He's not going to be that number one, that centerman like a McDavid or a Crosby or a McKinnon who is going to score 120 points or something. He rubs me as a Kopitar type, which that is what he's being primed to take over, is that number one, two-way centerman that can play on the power play, play on the penalty kill, play all those heavy minutes, and be pivotal to them winning, especially the playoffs. But he needs those big point producers, that goal scorers around him. And right now, they don't really have to put that around him, right? Their main goal scorers of Moore and Kempe, those are do you really think Trevor Moore and Adrian Kempe are the big goal scorers for your team? I don't think so. Sure, Kevin Fiala's fine, but what about in 3-4 years when Byfield's still in his contract? Sure, the cap's going to go up, and there's so many things that could happen. But what I'm saying is that they're going to have to outsource that. And when you're outsourcing, that's not always, it's not a 100% done deal. And especially with the city of LA and the current times that we're in, I don't really see any sort of big signings happening, and unless they trade for someone, which they don't really have a ton of good things to give away, I don't know where those players are going to come in from. So unless they have and once again, mid is the name of the game for the Kings right now. And they're not going to finish in a horrible spot where they can draft for that number one, that good goal scorer, those guys to put around him. So they're not going to be able to draft that unless they trade up in the draft, which once again they'll have to give up stuff for. So really, at the end of the day, they just have a lot of things going on where they just don't have the pieces of the puzzle to really put together a team that can be competitive for so many years, and until I see something happening for a while. So to me, during this contract, it's going to be tough for Byfield because he's not going to have those guys around him that he can feed the puck to get those assists or feed him the puck, because they're not going to be great offensively. So his numbers are going to be pretty stagnant in my eyes. And then he's also not the guy that's going to be lift them up, and he's the guy that makes them better, which he will be. But by that time, guys like Kopitar and stuff will be gone. So he'll be relying to guys who are not like Trevor Moore or like Kempe, and those guys I don't really see lasting forever. So it's just one thing after another where basically, long story short for me, is that the Kings, they are kind of screwed. To me, they're going to be one of those teams that will make it into the playoffs every other year or something like that. They'll miss it this year. The next year they'll do some sort of signing and something happens where they can barely make it in. They'll scratch it in again, with the Pacific Division always being as weak as it is. So they make it in next year and then maybe the year after that, but then they miss it again, and it's just never going to be a Stanley Cup. And that's what happens when you try to rebuild and then you pull yourself out of it before you're good enough for the future. The Sharks, they sold everything away so that they can get a guy like Will Smith and Celebrini and Eklund. They're going to have a good pick this year again, I think, and they get all these pieces together. They're trading away. Now, of course, the Sharks I'm not a huge fan of either, and I think they're going to have a huge lots of problems. But you look at a team like the Ducks. They've been rebuilding forever, and now they've got Carlson and McTavish and Zegras. As much as people don't like Zegras, but Zegras, Zellweger, and Minchikov, and they've got so many players that I can keep going down the list that they have all the pieces that from their own team to build up on, and they can outsource a few of those problems to bring onto the team, but it's not the main ones. The Kings, they look pretty screwed to me. They look like they're going to have a tough spot, and I don't see much happening for them for a while. But I guess that's all I got to say. So thank you for watching this. If you made it far, please, I'm begging you, please subscribe. And until next time, too sweet, have an amazing day, and ta-ta for now.